I covered Brexit before I covered Trump. I know it's kind of weird. I was living in Brussels, but I was around sort of real courts and real, like, I had gone to the actual Versailles and I had seen places that had this opulence of like the old world. And I never felt more culture shock when I showed up at Mar-A-Lago after he won. And I was like, oh my God, what is this tacky place I'm in right now?
Welcome to this edition of the Warning Podcast. Very happy to be joined by Tara Palmeri, the political reporter at Puck News, which is the first thing I read every day. I think it's a great publication. Everybody who hears my voice ought to subscribe to it. Probably the most insightful thing that you can read about the nexus of all of the points of influence that direct America's culture. And from America's culture downriver of that is where our politics can be found out. And I think one of the most astute and very best chroniclers of it in this very tumultuous era is the person that I'm very privileged to have with me today, Tara Palmeri. Great to have you.
Thanks, Steve. It's very high praise coming from you. So I'm really happy to be on your show.
You bet. So listen, you wrote an amazing account of life in the nation's capital, in Washington, D.C. And I want to talk about that. But before I do, I just want to contextualize something that I think you get and you're able to bring to life better than almost anyone out there writing. And I first kind of had this epiphany on the John McCain campaign in 2008. And it was during the New Hampshire primary, and it's during the closing days, and on the Straight Talk Express. And so the Straight Talk Express, there's a bus behind it filled with national press. There's a bus behind that filled with some other reporters and supporters. And our three buses passes the Hillary bus, the bus of reporters behind it, and the bus of supporters behind that. And then we pass the Obama bus, and then the Romney bus. And what I realized, like, in that moment is that American politics, this global news event, a presidential cycle that never ends, is really at its core a small group of people on the first bus who are talking to a relatively small group of people on the second bus.
Yeah.
All of the people on the first buses are talking to all the people on the second buses. And as that plays out through the cable news shows, it creates a conventional wisdom, a type of conformity where opinions become cemented as realities, and there's a ubiquity of phrasing, like such as the White House believes or the White House says. And having worked in the building, right? Like it's never said anything, right? Building, right? It doesn't.
The White House doesn't speak.
There's a lot of people that work there, right? But in reality, right, there's about 15 assistants to the president, about 25 deputy assistants to the president. So it's this really small ecosystem, right?
And they have their talking points that they want us to put out there as if they're facts.
Right. And you take the reader behind to a restaurant, which is in Georgetown, which is like a great restaurant, right? But which is a hub of what? If you're watching this
God
or whatever, describe Cafe Milano, right? It represents what in the cultural firmament of Washington, D.C. in today's day and age.
I would say it's the place where you walk in the door and like you see John Kerry having lunch on one side with some like, Washington Post, like Sally Quinn or some Washington Post columnist, essentially, gossip columnist at one time, and then you see Mike Pompeo over there with some aides, maybe some defense contractor lobbyists. And then you see the old school lobbyists who can tell you stories about when they were talking with Kennedy and you just kind of like, everybody has to have enough money to sit down and have dinner there, because just the cost of a plate of, I don't know, Bronzino is $56 or something insane. So that's just for you to understand what Washington is. Like, you're not paying, no one's paying out of their pockets. If they are, like, it's lined from book deals, it's lined from, being on the board at Raytheon, or, being at a top lobbying shop forever, the connections they've made since they were 21 years old and can now sit down and dine on at Cafe Milano. So you've got like professional Washington there, all in on the game, all knowing how they got there. And they don't even care that, like, the guy on the left is like a, lefty liberal who ran as a Democratic nominee. And the guy on the right is like basically MAGA, could be the next defense secretary. And maybe the two will pass. Maybe they'll shake hands. Maybe they don't, but they all belong there for the same reason in a lot of ways. They've worked this, like, they've gone up the slippery slope, to get there to Cafe Milano. And, as a journalist, like, I've been invited to parties there. I've sat at the bar there. I've been invited by those people. And the conversation that they're having at that table, it's pretty much like a known thing. It's off the record. Have you ever read anything from a reporter being like, I was at Cafe Milano and I, did a hard-hitting interview? It's like, no, that's where everyone is politically incorrect and talking about what a shit show their party is or their side is, and how they're freaking out about how that is going to impact their bottom line, their influence in the town, and their power, right? Because everyone knows better than the boss in every corporate structure, right? And everybody sees the holes in the stories, and everyone in town is just like, they are paranoid that the next year another party is going to take over and they're going to be on the other side of, they're going to be on the losing side. Their contracts are maybe they'll lose a few contracts. It's like corporate America. They're trying to stay relevant, and everyone is afraid in Washington of losing relevancy, right? It's like the worst thing in the world. So why people never go away. It's like, why doesn't anyone ever go away? Just go away.
So
and they're filthy rich and they won't go away.
so amazing. I have so many questions, but when you walk in there, right, and you observe that room,
right,
are you like these people who the American people are told constantly are at each other's throats in a state of perpetual war? Are you like these people have a lot more in common than they do in disagreement? They are the same peoples, right, that exist in this strange capital culture here, or right? And then more importantly, maybe, do those people understand that they are each shades of the same person when they look around this room, which is culturally, right? It's neutral territory. Right, it's like,
yeah, it's kind of neutral ground. Yeah,
movie, right?
Yeah, it's like the DMZ zone of Washington. It's too elegant for a partisan fight. It's too elegant for Matt Gaetz to arrive. Do you know what I mean? It's too elegant for like Marjorie Taylor Greene or like the disruptors to arrive. And they're like a new batch of people that Washington is just like, I don't know how to deal with these people. I couldn't imagine AOC ever being in Cafe Milano, but like, Biden is a creature of Washington. And like, as we know, he went to go visit his son, a big time lobbyist, on his birthday at Cafe Milano, who was sitting down with like the head of Burisma. And that's totally normal. It happens on the left and the right. It's not like, I'm sure George W. Bush went to Cafe Milano frequently. And like, during Trump's age, the Cafe Milano, it really moved to the Trump hotel, to the lobby of the Trump hotel. Like, that's where a lot of the Republican wheeling and dealing was happening. The only difference between what was happening at Trump Hotel and their lobby in Cafe Milano was that Democrats would never go to the Trump Hotel. Like, it was not neutral ground. It was sort of reserved only for these Trump people and the people who are making money off the fat of the Trump, White House. And it was just too partisan. you couldn't go in there in like any dignified type of way. Like, Kimberly Guilfoyle was constantly holding court, like top lobbyists. Jeff Miller had his own like round table of, I guess, like what's the appetizer they had at the time, which I found to be so grotesque. It was bacon on clothespins, and they would bring that out, and it was just like and it was also a place of excesses. They had a BLT restaurant in there, and it was this really nice suit shop in there. I'm blanking on the name, but it was Italian. And I remember like never in DC have you seen like an Italian designer come in and Brioni. Like I think a Brioni tie is probably like $10,000, and that's in the hotel. So, there are certain places that are forbidden for partisans on either side, but Cafe Milano is the one place where the class of people who have been around a while, the, establishment Republicans and Democrats who have always known how to work together for many years and make money off of the town and how it works. They come together, and they don't necessarily sit together, but they can be there in the same room, and then people can talk, and they have their conversations, and the conversations are not talking points at all. And so, and they have their anxieties and fears and all that as well. It's just a different.
And so you come to report on, right? You come to report on, right, this kind of sentiment there, and you reveal in doing so, I think, one of the great oddities of our time in this compelling way, which is that there's a conversation that's occurring between the journalists and the political elite of the country in relative secrecy, club rules, right?
They're the political hacks, I would say, like not even the hacks, but like the professionals, political professionals who are making money based on their access to the White House, to the Pentagon, to Capitol Hill, to the highest levels of power. And most of them work in corporate America or like close to it. But those jobs that they have are based on their connections to power. So at one point they did work for Biden. So they still can, phone up Anita Dunn, who's at the, top of the rung of the White House. Maybe they can't call Biden directly anymore, but like, this is somewhere like you would find his former chief of staff, Ron Klain. You know what I mean? A lot of formers are in there who have the ability to pick up the phone and get straight to get the real talking points, because they're actually hired by corporations to get past the talking points. They don't they want more political intelligence, right? They want the real story. They're supposed to be able to tell their bosses, okay, people are saying this on cable news, but actually like look around the corner because that's really happening. Like that's why they are hired as lobbyists, consultants, etc. They have those connections. So to like sit down and talk to those people, it's like, okay, what are you telling your bosses who are paying you millions of dollars a year at, I don't know, name any blue chip company, Meta, Goldman Sachs, Chevron,
and what they're telling these people is not what they're saying on the record or on the cable news shows. If they're in that space, what they're saying is they're very worried about the race if they're rooting for Biden in this or have a rooting interest in Biden.
Everyone is basically saying like, for Democrats, they're like, Biden's fucked. Like that's what they're saying. Have you ever heard anyone on television say that before? No. Exactly. And Republicans are saying too, they're like, it's a flip of the coin if Trump wins. They're not pleased to have like the weakest product of a Republican candidate. Like I think the feeling is like, if these were two products, like they're both very weak products. Like they're cars that you don't know if they're going to be driving well in a few years. Like it's no doubt. So they know that the products are terrible. They're just trying to figure out like which one is better and how do they advise their clients. And I also think they come to journalists like us to kind of find out, okay, what are people saying? What's the real inside story? Because that's the value. Like that's the real money. That's not like opening up the USA Today or the New York Times, et cetera. Like the value is like going beyond the headlines. Like we say this at Puck, like the news starts where the news starts for Puck where the story ends. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
Because like that's the value. It's intelligence, it's expertise. And like, yeah, it requires like a little bit going over your skis to make predictions. But like, if you have the insight, the sourcing, and the expertise, like you should be able to take people to that next level, to that next dimension, because that's basically like in this information business of Washington, which you know very well, like, that's where the money and the power is. It's like who has the access to information.
So when people are sitting around, are they of the mood that Trump's coming back?
Yeah,
Is that the feeling in the air?
absolutely.
Okay.
I'm on both sides.
On
And
both.
Republicans aren't necessarily happy about it either. They know it brings chaos. In some ways, it's easier when there's a Democratic president because they can like there's a calm. They can't predict Trump either.
Democrats think he's coming back too.
Oh yeah. Oh totally.
Okay.
Yes. I the only people who say that he's not coming back are people that work directly for Biden. And
And
like their friends that are like on the outer circle of cheerleaders, but they're even they can't like it's just like okay, come on. You know that like look at every single poll in the battleground states. Like that they're this like their arguments. I mean, you could go into all of that, but yes, for the most part, professional Democrats believe that Trump is coming back and they're terrified.
and what is the plan, if any, to stop them? Does the White House believe that they can do what they did in 2020, that keep the president out of sight, that he'll make the rare appearance, come out a couple times a week, say something, go back, and that'll be it. Like Joe Biden will carry the message, Harris will carry the message. Like what is their theory of the case, like on how they beat Trump? Do they think that like people are gonna wake up right like in October and be like, oh man, that infrastructure deal was great. We love the CHIPS Act,
Yeah.
right? Like that they get credit for the accomplishments. What does anyone ever talk about that? Is that talked about right in the Cafe Milano right space? Like how are they going?
Right. That's a good question because everything you're saying is that is communicated from the White House, right? Like what you have just said, those are all like the talking points you get from the White House. Don't worry, in a year from now, everyone will feel the great effects of the economy. Maybe they will. Or maybe gas prices will surge in the summer and it'll be, or something will happen. The Cafe Milano crowd is they don't like the democracy argument. They don't think it's strong enough. They don't think that this whole idea, even though everyone in Washington is like personally traumatized by what happened on January 6th, including Republicans. Like I know top level Republicans that like won't talk about it because it brings them anxiety. And, it was a trauma in this town, January 6th, but they don't think it's the strongest argument for the American people. Like it's too conceptual. It's not a real thing like that they can touch or see, like migration or the economy, how much money they have in their pocketbooks. You know what I mean? So they sort of fear that this whole democracy idea and the fear of autocracy is like is not salient enough. And really, like the only people who can understand what it's like to be under that kind of rule are probably like recent Americans. Like, for example, like my family came from Soviet Poland, and like my grandmother can talk about like Putin and how scary he is, but not a lot of people really quite understand like what that's like and what they're capable of. At least not Americans who have been here for generations. They don't know anything about that. They take democracy for granted. So I feel like you're trying to sort of inject like a fear that people just take for granted for so long. And I hear this from a lot of people. That New Yorker story that came out about Biden, the one line that I kept getting forwarded from everyone in the professional class, like people who are like close to the highest levels of Democratic leaders or like worked with them at some point, people that are in power now, was I cannot believe that Mike Donnellan, who's very close to Joe Biden, he's like Joe Biden's other brain. You don't even know about him. He's so low key. If he walked into Cafe Milano, like everyone would know who he was, but anywhere else in the world, no one would know him. He's very unassuming. He's a nice guy, but he said that the polling showed them not to lean into democracy, but they're doing it anyway. And everyone's like, "What? Are they kidding? No, they're terrified." that the White House is leaning too hard into democracy. Um, Abortion will be very salient. And the other thing that the Biden White House is constantly saying is like, everyone thought we weren't going to do well in 2022, and we exceeded expectations thanks to Roe v. Wade, which I agree. But Biden also wasn't on the ballot, and you had a lot of like activists come out. You really had like an activist crowd. Most people don't vote in the midterms. Trump chose the shittiest candidates of all time, and like you had these activists, and
Well,
hopefully they'll come out again. But look, like right now, all of the core of the Democratic base, the activists, the students, they're all protesting against Biden right now. So it's hard to say.
it's very hard to say. And I think that in the aftermath of an election, right, everybody goes out, tries to claim credit, right? What was the 22 election
Mm,
about? Was it a referendum on Chuck Schumer, on Schumerism, right? Like, I don't think it is,
no.
right, or it
Yeah.
was. And so you look at it, right? Like, and you look at Carrie Lake, right? And you
Mm,
look at Katie Dobbs, and you look at a genuinely insane person, right? And Carrie Lake.
right.
And you're like, it's not like she lost by 20 points, right? It's
No.
not like, right, it's not like people didn't think about it, right? So you go out like across
Right.
these spaces, right? It's on the edge, it's on the margin, right? Like Dr. Oz is not losing by 15 points.
Right.
It's pretty extraordinary how tight these races are, right? And there was a real, like, I think, like an absence of humility probably in the aftermath of 22. And a year and a half later, right, people are saying, well, the next thing that's going to happen, right, is tied to the last thing that happened. And by the way, here's what happened. The place I was, trying to get to with you is like at this point, right, which is, what is the campaign about? Right? Like,
Mm.
does anybody ever does the Biden campaign ever get asked, your strategy is what? Right?
I
Like,
the really,
your
yeah, no, it's
message is like, because I feel, right, as somebody who, right, I share the
right.
Mark Cuban position. He could be on his deathbed, right, like supported, right,
Mm,
in a in a cryo tube. I will vote for him, right, against Donald Trump, right? Like
right.
that's where I am on this, right? But that not being where most of the country is,
Yeah.
right? What
So
what's the
this has always been, I see the problem is that like it their argument, the non-electability argument of Donald Trump, like it doesn't work anymore. And they haven't moved past that. They are like, don't compare me against the opponent, like don't compare me, against the almighty, compare me against my opponent. Well, guess what? People actually want this guy. They do. Like, sure, he has a ceiling, but he has just enough people in the swing states where he's beating Biden to win this. So it's like they can't use that Trump is not electable argument anymore. He probably will not be indicted before election day. So they need to also get that off the table. They have to treat him seriously, and they can't just, you know, hope that Trump acts crazy and that makes Biden look better. Because the truth is like the crazy and the dementia and the chaos of Trump, the porn stars, the this, the that, that's baked into Donald Trump. You know what you're getting with Donald Trump. The problem right now with the Biden campaign is that they're trying to say that Biden is elevated from Trump, but like we're not really seeing Biden in an elevated way. Not saying he's at Trump's level, but we're not really even seeing him that much.
what
So
is
it's
that
like, how,
what does that mean, right? When you sit around, right, and you just kind of slow that down, right? Like when you're kind of walking
yeah,
around with someone, and I really mean this seriously, like who's in
yeah,
touch with like reality, right? Like
right,
when someone's like, no, 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 you don't understand. Joe Biden is elevated from Donald Trump, meaning what?
right,
That he's beneath their dignity at a point they don't need to respond to this, they don't need to engage them. What
totally.
does that mean?
Yeah, no, in some ways, like it's interesting because like I wrote about this too in the piece that like what has the Democratic Party learned from the GOP primary? being above Trump, not fighting him doesn't work. You know what I'm saying? All of these GOP candidates, none of them were willing to get to Trump's level and really go after him, and they lost. And so if Biden runs a campaign saying I'm elevated than Trump, I don't know that that's necessarily going to work. I mean, they're saying now that he's trying to goad Trump into the match and this and that. The truth is, both candidates are not really seeing them out there too much either, because the cable news doesn't know how to handle Trump right now. They don't know when to give him airtime, when not to. They don't know how much time to spend on him, when not to. They're kind of dreading the day he becomes the official nominee, because it's like, then they're going to be called out for giving Trump too much airtime. Maybe they don't call out every lie. How can they have an interview? Anytime a journalist has an interview with Trump, you look like a heel. Seriously, no matter how you do it, you look like a heel. He hijacks the entire conversation. They don't want to do that to their top talent, I'm sure. They need to channel the Trump voters, but they don't know that the only way they can do it is channel Trump voters. And so they have the reporters go out there and talk to people and ask them how they feel. I mean, that's pretty much it. They don't want to have Trump surrogates on the shows, like at least on a lot of these networks. They don't want Trump surrogates on because they have to spend the whole time fact checking them, right? And so it doesn't make for a good interview. So they just don't know how to deal with Trump. So Trump gets his own ecosystem. People aren't really paying attention. They're half listening, and they don't really understand that he just said Russia can invade a NATO country that doesn't pay its bills and what that means, right? And at the same time, it's not like you're getting this strong message from Biden. You keep hearing that he's not really there, and then you look around and you're like, well, he's not really there. He's not doing press conferences. He's not sitting down with Norah O'Donnell and doing the Super Bowl interview. He's on TikTok. Okay, fine, but barely. I mean, half the time you're seeing his back in the interview. I thought that in the video, I thought it was interesting, and it just feels very disingenuous. Like, he's an old time politician. Like, let him do the thing that he does. Do the network interview. Take stop trying to make him young, but make him be out there and in charge. And the background quotes that they give to these reporters, like, he cursed about Netanyahu. He's angry about migration. He's fighting everybody. He's just pissed off and in charge. And okay, great. The background quotes in Axios and the New York Times, the Washington Post, they're not going to drive voters. Like, Jon Stewart was right. Run the tapes, show the video, because like that's going to be more compelling. Like, they're not using the power of the video to their advantage in the same way that Trump did. Because like, I remember when I was covering the Trump the Trump presidency, he was constantly letting the press inside the Oval Office at all times. Even if like you have Caitlin Collins screaming at him about Michael Cohen and whatever porn star in the middle, like right in front of Angela Merkel, and she's like, whoa, whatever. It's Trump being like, looking like a president, sitting next to a leader, screaming at the press, and you see him doing his job in some way, right? You see him being like, whether you consider it presidential or not. Like, remember when he brought the videos into the cabinet briefings, right, and had his entire cabinet thrown? He's like, what are you doing? What are you doing? It was The Apprentice. He was running the White House like it was the real White House of DC, or like The Apprentice. He understands producing. And the problem is that they're not really letting Biden be produced well enough, because I think they're afraid that he might come off old. Like, he might misstep. They might do something, he might look feeble, or he might not seem, empowered, or this and that. And so they bring in all these reporters and give them access. Now they're giving a lot of reporters access so they can report back. Oh, he seemed sharp. He seemed really with it. And I see it. The Washington Post got an interview, Axios, obviously, New Yorker. Yeah. So they're trying different ways to make the point, when really, like, just let the camera crews in there and do what Trump did. And you got to just throw caution to the wind.
So I think that this is so you said something that I think is incredible, right? That's like so revealing, right, and debilitating in this moment for the White House, right? And I want to get deeper on it. Psychologically, right? What you said, right, is that the people around Biden, as they assess the political situation, the conclusion that they come to is that Biden exists in some morally superior position than Trump, and therefore their engagement with Trump is put through that filter. And I just, if I went into a meeting, right, as
Mm,
someone who's been in, at a top level of a
mm,
winning presidential campaign, a
right.
losing presidential campaign that was the nominee, big, I would, what the fuck? Right? Like
Right.
that's like nobody right outside this room accepts that.
You got
They
to
don't.
play, you got to be defensive. You got to fight. That's the thing. But I think they're starting to do that. I will say, I mean, according to Axios, they say he's going to start goading Trump and he's going to try to bring on the I guess engagement. But I think people are going to want to see it rather through Truth Social or this bite and that bite. I think essentially the two men are going to have to stand there and have a bloody, debate. Whether that happens or not, I don't know. But I do think that like the past year or so, I mean, he wouldn't even say Trump's name for a long time. And neither would the candidates that were running against him. How much free time did Trump get completely unattacked? It was kind of incredible, right? And if anything, all these indictments, they just further his narrative that he's a martyr. Obviously untrue, but like if you're only half paying attention, you'd be like, wait a minute, why does he have more indictments than Al Capone? Do you know what I'm saying? It's just like, but you're only half, because you have to assume that most people are half paying attention. It's actually
Much less
felony
than
charges,
that.
but
Yeah.
not indictments. But it gets so confusing. Like even for me, I think can everyone just keep me up to date on every single trial that's going on? And if I as a reporter am covering this every day, and you as a political junkie and a reporter are covering this every day, and we're still kind of trying to figure it out. Um, American people are zoned out, and they might they're kind of like losing it in the nuance. They're losing it. They're playing like too much of a nuanced political game in a lot of ways, like the way things were normally done. But again, like you and I are talking right now, and you have a huge following, and people are watching you instead of watching the traditional cable channels right now or the networks. And how are they going to talk? And your audience listens to you because you have authority. And so, like, they're trying to play this like game of, well, they say they're trying to play the game of reaching out to influencers, but I don't know. I think in some ways, when it comes to the press, they're still playing it a little bit too traditional. They had a really unique experience in 2020. They really did. COVID, Black Lives Matter, George Floyd. Everybody hates Trump. Everyone's united. Biden doesn't really have a message. It's just, we need to get rid of Trump. And that's a strong message, right? Everyone's out there and ready to do it. Plus Trump tells all of his voters, don't vote early. Mail-in ballots are suspicious. He screws himself over, but everybody else is united to vote against him. Now everyone's pissed at Biden. The kids, the students they're protesting about Gaza, African-American people, Arabs. It's like, he needs to get them behind something that's like, we hate Trump, because now they're like, they've forgotten about the craziness. They're having nostalgia in weird ways. And I just don't think that they figured it out yet.
So there's kind of two things that I think that, we've talked about in kind of around that I think are just politically the way that I see the race, right? Whomever's going to lose the campaign is going to be the person the race is about. The race has been about Biden and
Okay.
his competence, feebleness, his lack of whatever for a lot of the last year. Trump has made it about Biden. Hillary Clinton was winning that campaign all the way through the last week because the race had been about Trump. James Comey makes it about her enough in the last week.
Yeah.
Trump narrowly wins. So Biden has to make the race about Trump. And I wonder, right, as we like talk about this, whether you think that they understand that, right? That the
Mm.
race it's an either or. It's either a race about Biden or it's a race about Trump. And there's a larger kind of caveat involved in it, which is this. the more chaos there is,
Mm,
even if Donald Trump is the source of the
right.
chaos benefits Trump because the premise of Trump is that he's a strong man who can control the chaos. And this is kind of
And,
fundamental strongman 101, right? There's
right.
contradictions in this. It doesn't make sense, right? But it's important, right, that the Biden team kind of
Mm.
understand this. Chaos benefits Trump, and whomever the race is about is the person in this dynamic who's going to lose. Do you think they understand those things?
I don't know. I mean, there's also a few other like facets to that. The fact that like the people who truly love Trump love chaos too. They believe it's a way to rebuild and change the system, right? They use chaos as a tool.
Believe
So like,
they believe the chaos is a passage to
right.
war. They believe
Exactly. They believe they have to
all has
destroy to get to
runoff
what they
into
want.
access.
Exactly.
Right.
And that would probably be like the core part of his base. But the other thing is like chaos around Biden, which there is a lot of chaos, at least in the world. We have Israel and Gaza, we've got Ukraine, and there is actually a feeling of chaos around Biden as well. And and when you're the president, like that was the one thing that really hurt Trump was there was just too much chaos around him during COVID, and he's telling people to drink like disinfectant and use ivermectin, and everyone's dying in the streets and they don't know what's happening, and it's like Black Lives Matter, George, there's too much chaos, and everyone decides we don't want chaos, we don't want it, you know what I mean? But if there's chaos and you're the president, that hurts you, right? But if there's chaos and you're running I don't know, chaos, yes, probably helps Trump in some ways, and chaos hurts Biden, and there's chaos around Biden too. So I don't know how I mean, I don't know what you would do in this situation as like a political strategist. Chaos at the border, like Trump didn't want to pass that bill at the border because he knew chaos at the border helps him and it hurts Biden.
And the last thing is, like, speaking of which, right? Does anybody in the Democratic Party that you talk to, does anybody at Cafe Milano look ahead to the Democratic National Convention, the Israeli war, and the magnitude of the protests that are possible, the total chaos at the
Oh
Chicago?
yeah.
And is that talked about? Are people worried about it? Is it top of mind? Are people
Yes.
we're 100 days
I got a
away?
phone call. Yeah. Yeah, I got a phone call yesterday because they allowed a group to organize outside of the DNC, and someone political operative that I know, who's from that area in Chicago was like, it's going to be a mess. They cannot be approving these people for protest permits. They can't do it, and they're doing it. The DNC, and well, the city of Chicago is doing it, and it's just they're terrified. I don't know how they stop the protests. That's going to be a huge issue for Biden. It already is. I don't know if you've seen any of the reporting about how they're actually vetting the audiences at this point. And he goes on the stage. Some people are shouting 4 more years. Some of them are calling him Genocide Joe. It wouldn't be any better with Trump. Trump would try to turn Palestine into a parking lot. You know what I'm saying? But people don't know that. They don't care that. And they're, in some ways, they're voting against their best interests by voting against Biden, but they're just so angry. I just interviewed Hill Harper. He's running for Senate in Michigan. It's a long shot. But he said to me something that was really interesting because he talks a lot to the Arab voters in Michigan. About 100,000 of them in Dearborn alone could determine, the election in a big way in this swing state. And he said that when he talks to Arab people, they say to him, and he says, if you protest Biden by voting for Cornel West, a third party, or Jill Stein, or just voting, we're not coming out, we're voting uncommitted, you do realize that's a vote for Trump. And he said to me that the voter that one of the Muslim leaders explained to him, you don't understand our culture. We'd rather be stabbed in the face than in the back. And so that's how they feel about Biden. And he says the Black community has a similar feeling. They feel like they're being taken for granted by the Democrats. Like they're always supposed to show up. And they want to send a message too. And there's also and I just don't, I mean, I'm going to this victory party tonight at Trump's Mar-a-Lago, you know.
We speak, it is the afternoon of Super Tuesday. And, Trump, I guess we
Mm,
have 16 states, one territory, and Donald Trump's going to
mm,
sweep the table tonight, right? We'll find out wherever across the states, where, Nikki Haley's aggregate number is. But you're going to Mar-a-Lago, you're going to the
mhm.
victory party. I guess we anticipate Trump will go out and say, I'm the Republican nominee tonight, officially,
Yes.
that crosses that line, where you
Mm,
become the presumptive nominee of the party. This stuff matters because you want the keys to
mhm.
the RNC, right? All the money, all the accounts, all the
Boot
shit,
Ronna
right? All the
McDaniel.
data, right? You want to get your people in, their people out, right?
Mhm.
All that
Yeah.
stuff that comes with that. So you're off to Mar-a-Lago, which I wanted to ask you about, right down to like, what is it like to go into Mar-a-Lago and all of that? But so
Yeah.
talk about tonight at Mar-a-Lago, what you're doing, where you're going, what you expect the mood to be.
Well, first of all, this is like one of the best weeks Trump has ever had when you think about the Supreme Court ruling that said that he couldn't be taken off the ballot. He's having a strong week. Um, he's going to go out there with a victory party. He'll probably win every state. Obviously, the kind of elephant in the room is all the people who still vote for Nikki Haley. But it looks like 9 out of 10 Republicans are still standing by Trump. The thing about Trump is like you can never really pin him to a wall on any policy issue, right? He muddles everything. He's just all over the place. And that's sort of what keeps, I think he sees that as a way, like almost like as a salesman where you, yes, man, no, man, tell everybody a different story. That's a way I think he thinks he can bridge his coalition, right? Um, yeah, Bright to Life, 16 weeks. I don't know. It's like he keeps everything super nebulous and you can't really understand. Even as a reporter, you can't really pin him to anything, right? Changes his mind about things, just, finger to the wind, whatever. So it'll be interesting if he comes off it with a bit more of like a moderate tone, realizing like it's time to coalesce now that he is the nominee. We're pretty sure Nikki Haley will step down, and it's been interesting to watch her have victory speeches along the way, even though they were concession speeches. I wonder what her real concession speech will sound like, and if she comes out guns blazing against Trump. Um,
So you
but
think
in terms of just go
when do you think she gets out?
tonight, yeah,
You think
tonight.
okay. Okay.
Yeah, I think this is it. She said I'm not going to go on past Tuesday. I think she knows it's her time. We'll see what she says. I mean,
Is she
she
gonna
come out.
get is she gonna get in line or is she gonna
She'd probably do like a Ron DeSantis or something like that. But who knows? I mean, maybe she sees a future for herself at the No Labels party, or no. Maybe she realizes what I think a lot of people are seeing is she doesn't have a future in the Republican Party, and maybe she thinks, you know what, throw caution to the wind. I'm going to run as a third party, No Labels candidate to take out Trump. I don't see that as her character. Like she doesn't seem like a chaos agent to me, and like the kind of person who just throws everything away. I mean, she wouldn't get back on the board at Raytheon if she did that, right? She's
right.
not going to make millions of dollars. She can't be Secretary of State in Trump's, administration or possibly vice president. Because some could argue she would be a useful vice presidential, candidate to bring over those moderates to Trump. But yeah, I mean, there's also just like the whole thing of going into Mar-a-Lago. It's like exactly like in my mind, it's what an American like thinks Versailles is like. Everything is gilded and there's these pillars and it's absurd and the people are kind of tacky and it's just kind of this whole like fan club trumpets that love it. It's like this adoring fan club. It's like a king. It's really like the court. It's the Mar-a-Lago court and you've been invited to the court essentially. And yeah, we're press, so we obviously have our own space and everything, but I'm always just like interested to see everyone milling about. I've been before without like as a member of press, just as someone guest, because I'm always trying to like get the vibe on the ground there. But Trump, I remember had a model of the Air Force One. He wanted to change the colors.
Right.
And he put that out there.
Red Air Force
He
One.
would put yeah, I'm sure if it was up to him, he could put all of his classified documents out as brochures on the living room area for people to look through. He doesn't get to stay in the White House forever, but he gets his own kingdom, right? And he's kind of trapped in there. He can't go anywhere but Mar-a-Lago, so it's his playroom. And I'm always sort of curious to see what he's highlighting, who's there, how many people are there, like just to kiss his ass, the VPs, all hoping to, I'm sure Tim Scott will be there with his fake wife, fiance, whatever. And it's a show. I mean, I'm making too light of it, but it's kind
I
of a
mean, it's an
show.
incredible menagerie of human
Of
nature
course.
that
Oh
assembles,
yeah.
right?
I actually the first I covered Brexit before I covered Trump. I know it's kind of weird. I was living in Brussels, but I was around sort of real courts and real like I'd gone to the actual Versailles and I had seen,
Right.
places that had this opulence of like the old world. And I never felt more culture shock when I showed up at Mar-A-Lago after he won. And I was like, oh my God, what is this tacky place I'm in right now? This is exactly like the most American horrible version of the old glamour of the old world. But I don't know, like, see, the more we talk about it though, I start to think like there's just such a big subset of people, like in the way that like Democrats are terrified that Trump will win. I don't think that Republicans are terrified that Biden will win. And that's the difference too. They have a different swagger about it. They're not like, oh my God, it's the end of times. It's like if Biden wins, I think they're just like some of them would probably be happy to see Biden win. Don't you think?
think, I mean, I think like the
Like
senior,
professional Republicans in Washington.
oh, for sure, for sure.
Right.
They want this to end, right? They want Trump to go away,
Yes.
right? They want the madness to stop, right? And they all know they're lashed to the bow of the ship till it's over, right?
I
I
mean, they
mean,
know there's tons of money to be made if Trump wins, right? There's tons of fat to grift off of, but
like
they,
you can't. There was just a story out about Lindsey Graham, and I just like
mm,
I literally I spent a year and a half with the guy,
oh,
right,
wow.
around the country, and so there's a there's a it's an incredible thing to almost every single person you ever worked with in a business that like requires some element of conviction involved, right? Otherwise, it's just all insanity, right? It's just all pure
Yeah.
cynicism, right? It's that literally, like almost without exception, like everyone got like in line with this ultimately, right? And
I think
so
they did it out of fear.
it's
I
all
think it
like
was
it all
fear.
has like degrees, right? There's all degrees to it. But yeah, I mean, people out of fear, in the end, though, like the biggest thing is people get in line, right? People get,
They don't want to be Liz Cheney. They don't want to be Adam Kinzinger. They don't want that humiliating defeat. They don't want to be the martyrs.
and so there's something that, people want to stay there in this like small kind of terrarium for 40 years, right? And I just like listening to you describe like Mar-a-Lago. The only thing like I can say about it, right, is as somebody who grew up in New Jersey,
Mm, same
guys from
here.
guys from guys from fucking Queens, right? So all you ever
Right.
know, right? Like about it,
Exactly.
right? Like,
He probably had
rotation,
this like tacky big house
right?
in Queens, right? That was
Absolutely.
basically it.
Like
Yeah.
make it look like Versailles, right? Like it's
Right.
incredible. And
Make my own court.
it's and but the Biden people, like by and large, right, they're just in their own world, it sounds like, where things will snap into place later because when people focus and they remember
Yeah.
there's always something
They're
that's
basing
about
it
to
on a lot of
happen.
what ifs,
Spinning
like
things
too many
right
things that
now.
are not certain. I don't sense there's like a real strategy unless they're holding it so close to vest that like even we're not seeing it because you work in this business, you see around corners. I'm not seeing anything. And I've just seen that some of their old arguments about Trump's unelectability have just gone out the window. For years they've said that Trump is inelectable. That's it. And it's like actually it looks like he is. Um, and they are basing it on Dobbs. We know that. And they just think that once it becomes clear it's a real election against Trump and Biden, that people will choose Biden. But it looks like independents are even split. So it's just their initial argument is to me is dead. So it makes me wonder what is their next argument. And if it's just democracy and abortion, Um, Democrats in town, people who have worked with these people, they know they don't think that's enough. Like you still have to sell a product, still need a person, still need a message. I don't know what the next term is for Biden. I know what it is for Trump. I know exactly what it is for Trump. Deportation. Everybody's dictator day one.
Right.
Deep state explodes if he's able to pull any of this off. A lot of the Democrats I talked to are like, we just need to win in the House as a balance to this craziness. That's what they're praying for right now, and they're investing a lot of money into it. But you're a political strategist. Like, what kind of advice would you give Biden right now?
Got to take the fight to Donald Trump about big things, right? There's big things happening in the world. Right? Arguments that Vladimir Putin is
Mm,
making are identical, right, to an argument that someone speaking German made, right, in 37,
but
1938.
that's the democracy argument, and they may lean into that
It's
harder,
a
maybe.
it's part of it, right? But it's broader than that, right? It's so, for example, the black woman in Ohio who at
Mm,
25 weeks, 4 days short of the 26-week ban, has vaginal bleeding, goes to the emergency room.
yes,
What happens, right? The ethics committee meets for 8 hours.
totally.
And so what does she do, right? She says, fuck it, and walks out of the hospital and goes home. Comes back the next day, right? Still isn't seen. The third day is when she has the miscarriage. And though they dropped the charges, right, she's prosecuted. The
This
question
is
is,
insanity.
right,
Like, this is insanity, right?
does that woman live in a democracy? And I would argue she doesn't, right? And so when you talk about democracy, right, there is a framework to do it, right? That Franklin Roosevelt's speech to Democratic Convention in 1936, right, is that framework, right, where he talks about,
Hmm.
right, there was a king and we overthrew the king. But
Right.
now there's a new type of king. All of the rich
And
people.
he's at Mar-a-Lago.
That's it, right? And so there's a way,
Right.
because in the end, right, it's a communication business, right?
It
It's
is, and that's
about
where they're
telling the
struggling.
story. And that's where they're
But it's
struggling.
not, the problem is that your message is very strong. It's incredibly strong. It's the person who's giving the message too. And that's what they need to work on. It's like they need to
Well, there's
they
nothing to work on.
this
81. He's a fully formed he's a fully
and the
formed
and the whole message that Trump is more demented or he messes up names, like, again, baked into Trump, and Trump just seems younger. And we voted for Biden when he was Trump's age. But we were like voting for him thinking, okay, it's a bridge, right? Well, apparently that was apparently that was just a metaphor. That was not, but that's the thing. Like, they're trying to sell, yes, people were willing to vote for Biden at 77, but are they willing to vote for him at 81? Trump's 77, turning 78. And I think that, to me, that's one of their weaker lines, is that Trump is as old as Biden. He just doesn't give off the same energy. Biden was different when he ran when he was 77. Although it was, it's a different time. It was COVID. Again, it's so many like, there's a lot of hypotheticals. I think your argument is super powerful. I think the abortion argument killed that, Republican, and I'm blanking on his name right now, in Kentucky, that strong ad with the girl that got an abortion because she was being molested by her stepfather. They can do that, and tie Biden into that and Trump into that, or like make it a causal effect. This is like the work of ad makers, right?
like so like that to me, like I'm curious like what that means, like on all sides, right? Like what does everybody think is going to happen? I mean, he, like, a lot of things can happen, right? I don't mean to
Right.
trivialize it at all, right? Like a lot of terrible things can happen, but um I'm just
I mean, we've
curious.
seen the impact. We've seen like the impact on his policies and his decisions. Like, the court, Roe versus Wade was overturned. It's a huge problem. Women experiencing it day to day in their lives. It's affecting, obviously, poor women. It's terrible. It's just like, it's a huge consequential thing. At the same time, the steel tariffs that he passed against China, Biden's still using them. NAFTA, when he ripped that up, we're still using that same trade agreement. And so like there are some parts of the Trump administration that they've kept, including like they kept Title IX for a while at the border. And like people kind of see it both ways. And I don't think they can imagine Trump quite as a dictator, even though he says he's going to be one, because like you said, there is a check and balance in this country. But I don't know, because again, like it's the little decisions that can end up, not little, but like appointing a Supreme Court justice is a huge decision. Apparently,
the IVF stuff, right? It all cascades down, right? And it all
right.
falls poor people, right? Like
it's always poor people. It's like, and it's affecting them. That's the thing. And so these people in the professional class, like maybe they don't really care because they know their lives are going to be fine.
Yep.
They know their lives are going to be fine. And again, a lot of these Democrats too in the professional class, they did come in there wide-eyed, working for their congressman or their senator, believing in something, and then they obviously saw dollar signs. They didn't come to go to school at Georgetown or American or come from whatever state school to show up in DC. They thought they were changing the world, and I think everybody still has that inside of them. And they're obviously Democrats for a reason, and Trump is like the antithesis of that and everything that they fought for. So I think there's also a real fear, but I also think when Trump comes into town, he's a wrecking ball and he changes things so drastically that it's hard for them to do their jobs. Like it's hard for them to lobby. It's hard for them to communicate to their bosses what to expect next. It's hard for them to make inroads in Trump world. Like the way things were, the polite society, like there's a reason why Trump world really can't go to Cafe Milano. They have to go to Trump Hotel. But I'm sure like AOC would never be spotted in Cafe Milano either. It's a different crowd, you know what I mean? And in a lot of ways, they're nihilistic too. So
well, you gave us a great look inside of it today to a unique culture.
Thanks.
Capital where, what's portrayed on the cable shows is conflict, but there's a lot of chumminess in the green room always, and more shared interest than we often talk about, but gets covered in Puck News all the time.
Thanks. Yeah.
Tara Palmeri, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Steve. Thank you so much. I'd love to have you on my pod as well. Somebody's got to win. You were an amazing guest, and would love to have you on as we get into this time and try to game out.
Crazy year. Just getting started. Yeah. 244 days to go. Thank you for listening to my political commentary. If you like what you heard today, please also consider subscribing to The Warning daily newsletter on Substack.